Hey guys, Dimension Master Studios here, how y'all doing? So, when it comes to Ninjago, out of all the villains that we've gotten, my personal favorite villain of the show would easily have to be Morro. I think that Morro is a very interesting and compelling character for a variety of different reasons. Stuff like his backstory and his history with Sensei Wu, his story throughout the events of Season 5, the parallels between him and Kai, as well as his dynamic with him and Lloyd, his death and redemption at the end of Season 5, which continues on during Day of the Departed, and so much more. There's a lot of things about Morro that I think are genuinely really interesting, but in today's video, I want to talk about something interesting when it comes to Morro that I've never really seen people talk about, and that is Morro's main motivation for doing everything that he does during the events of Season 5. I feel like when it comes to Morro, the main reason why he does everything he does during the season is because of a superiority and inferiority complex that he has. So in today's video, I want to take a look at these two things and talk about how they relate to Morro. So let's get into this whole thing. So before we talk about Morro, I feel like it's important if we define what a superiority and inferiority complex is. When it comes to a superiority complex, that one is pretty self-explanatory. It is a scenario in which someone believes that they are better or superior in comparison to those around them. Meanwhile, an inferiority complex is a scenario in which someone believes that they are worse or inferior in comparison to those around them, to the point where that person believes that they need to constantly prove and validate themselves in order to be seen as valid in the eyes of other people, to the point where it can lead to an unhealthy obsession. And I feel like when it comes to both of these complexes, these are things that we see with Morro during the events of Season 5. Now, something that I'm sure some of you are probably asking is, how is it that Morro can have a superiority and inferiority complex, given that these two things are pretty different to one another? And yes, that is correct. When it comes to the superiority complex, it's based around someone feeling better in comparison to those around them. Meanwhile, the inferiority complex relates into someone feeling worse in comparison to those around them. So how is that Morro can have both these things? Well, I feel like when it comes to Morro during the events of Season 5, Morro initially started off with an inferiority complex, but over time, it eventually changed and became a superiority complex. So now let's actually take a look at Morro during the events of Season 5 in order to take a look at these complexes that Morro has. So let's start off by taking a look at Morro's superiority complex, because this is something that I feel we see a lot of during the events of Season 5. With Morro doing stuff like being really impatient and not listening to what the other Ghost Generals have to say, him preferring to do things on his own, him looking down on other people, especially the ninja team, and especially Lloyd, with Lloyd becoming the Green Ninja, Morro setting out to try and prove Destiny wrong by finding the tomb of the first Ninjutsu Master, which ultimately led to him dying in the Caves of Despair, and Morro feeling entitled to becoming the Green Ninja. This is something that I talked about during my video discussing why I think Lloyd became the Green Ninja, but as I said during that video, I feel like Morro felt entitled to becoming the Green Ninja because of various things that we saw with Morro during that flashback scene that we got during the second episode of Season 5. When it came to Morro, we know that he had access to elemental powers, meanwhile the rest of Wu's students didn't. We know that Sensei Wu took in Morro, and essentially he was like an adopted father to Morro, meaning it's entirely possible that Morro maybe got special treatment in comparison to the other students, and also Morro put in a lot of hard work and effort into his training. And I feel like all these things ultimately resulted in Morro feeling like he was entitled to becoming the Green Ninja. And when Morro was ultimately denied the ability to become the Green Ninja, Morro then set out to try and prove not just Sensei Wu, but Destiny itself wrong. And I feel like that also connects back into Morro's superiority complex. Not him setting out to try and prove his Destiny wrong, but him specifically going out to try and become the Green Ninja. That connects back into the superiority complex, and I feel like all these things ultimately connect back into that idea of Morro feeling like he is superior and better in comparison to all those around him. When it comes to Morro, he essentially believes that he is on top and no one can be better than him at anything. Again, all this connects back into that idea of Morro feeling superior in comparison to all those around him. However, as I said, I feel like when it comes to this superiority complex that Morro has, it's something that was created as a result of the initial inferiority complex that he has. So now let's actually take a look at that. So when it comes to Morro's inferiority complex, this is something that I feel like we mainly see during that flashback scene that we get with Morro. So remember, the idea behind the inferiority complex relates into the idea of someone feeling like they are worse in comparison to all those around them. And this is something that I feel like we do see with Morro, because think about Morro's situation prior to being taken in by Sensei Wu. For a long time, Morro was an orphan and he was struggling to survive. He didn't have a home, he didn't have anywhere to go, and he didn't have a family or anyone who cared about him. When it comes to Morro, he was all on his own. So when it comes to Morro, people would essentially look down on Morro and they wouldn't really think that much of him because he was just an orphan kid. There wasn't anything that special about him. That was, however, until Sensei Wu took him in and gave him a chance. And I feel like this right here is what created the inferiority complex that we see with Morro. Because when it comes to Sensei Wu, he was the first person who ever actually cared about Morro in really any way. And I feel like when it comes to Morro, he essentially wanted to prove himself to Sensei Wu in order to show that he was worthy of being taken in and being trained by him. Especially when you take into account the fact that Sensei Wu is the son of the first Spinjitzu master, the most important person in all of Ninjago, meaning that anyone related to him would also be really important. So Morro getting taken in by the son of the first Spinjitzu master, that would definitely be a really big deal, and I feel like this would just ultimately put more pressure on Morro to try and prove himself and show that he is worthy of being taken in by Sensei Wu and essentially being a son to him. Remember, when it comes to Morro, he was essentially like Wu's adopted son, meaning that when it comes to Morro, for the first time in his life, he had a father figure that cared about him. And again, this connects back into Morro wanting to prove himself to Sensei Wu. He wanted to show Wu that he was worthy of being taken in. And I feel like this, once again, connects back into that inferiority complex, with Morro potentially feeling like he was worse in comparison to Wu's other students, and him really wanting to prove himself. However, that's not all, because I feel like Wu wasn't the only person who Morro was trying to prove himself to, because I feel like Morro was also trying to prove himself to himself. Remember, Morro was an orphan who didn't have anyone in his life for a really long time, but with Sensei Wu taking him in and training him, Morro would essentially have the ability to make something of himself. He had the ability to show people that he was more than just that orphan kid that Sensei Wu took in. He had the ability to do something with his life. And I feel like when it comes to Morro putting in all this hard work and effort into his training, it all connects into Morro trying to prove to himself that he can be something, and he can do something with his life, and he can be more than what people thought about him. Which, interestingly enough, also connects back into something else that I talked about with Lloyd becoming the Green Ninja, and that is the idea of low expectations. During that video, I said that when it comes to Lloyd, he was burdened by low expectations as a result of Garmadon being his dad, meaning that people wouldn't look at Lloyd in the best light. And when it comes to Lloyd becoming the Green Ninja, I feel like this connects into Lloyd being able to overcome those low expectations and prove himself to people. And I feel like we see something similar with Morro. When it comes to Morro, he would also naturally have low expectations given his situation prior to being taken in by Sensei Wu, meaning that people probably wouldn't look at Morro in the best light. And this is even something that we see during that flashback scene with the other students not treating Morro the best. So when it comes to Morro, when it comes to him becoming the Green Ninja, this would be a way for Morro to prove himself. Not just to Sensei Wu and not just to himself, but everyone. He would be able to show people that he could be something and he could be more than just that orphan kid. However, I feel like when it comes to Morro wanting to become the Green Ninja, that is what ultimately led to his inferiority complex turning into the superiority complex. Remember, the idea is that when it comes to Morro, initially he felt worse in comparison to the other students, given his situation prior to being taken in by Sensei Wu. However, after Sensei Wu did take in Morro, he put a lot of time and effort into his training in order for Morro to prove to both Sensei Wu and to himself that he was worthy of being taken in, and Morro was trying to show that he could do something with his life and he could make something out of it, and he could be someone. And I feel like after Morro found out about the title of the Green Ninja, Morro gained an unhealthy obsession with wanting to become the Green Ninja because he felt like this was a way to prove himself to everyone that he could be someone. And as a result of this, Morro put in even more time and effort into his training. However, this results in Morro becoming a lot more violent and aggressive towards the other students, because at this point, Morro didn't think that he was worse in comparison to the other students. Morro believed that he was better in comparison to all those around him. Because of that unhealthy obsession that Morro had, it ultimately resulted in him feeling like he was superior in comparison to all those around him, and Morro wanted the other students to know about this. We saw that during one of the training sequences, with Morro being really violent and aggressive with the other students, and Morro really wanted to fight against them. Even though the other students were tired and were hurt by him, Morro didn't want to stop at all. Because again, Morro felt like he was better in comparison to all those around him, and he wanted to show it. And when it comes to Morro, with him feeling superior in comparison to all those around him, and him feeling like he was better in comparison to them, and that potential feeling of entitlement to becoming the Green Ninja, all of that initially spawned with Morro feeling worse in comparison to the other students, and Morro feeling like becoming the Green Ninja would be a way to ultimately prove himself, which led to that unhealthy obsession. The superiority complex spawned because of the initial inferiority complex, and all of it connects into Morro wanting to become the Green Ninja and the unhealthy obsession that he had with it. When it comes to Morro's superiority and inferiority complex, I think that this is a genuinely interesting and engaging part of Morro's character, and again, it's something that I feel like a lot of Ninjago fans don't really talk about that much, even though this is essentially the entire reason why Morro does what he does during the events of the show. It's because of Morro's belief that he's better in comparison to all those around him. However, Morro initially started off feeling like he was worse in comparison to all those around him, so he felt like he had to validate himself, which ultimately led to Morro gaining the unhealthy obsession with wanting to become the Green Ninja, which ultimately led to Morro feeling like he was better in comparison to all those around him, and that no one could be better than him at anything or in any way. And when it comes to both Morro's superiority and inferiority complex, I feel like there is one line that we get with him during Season 5 that perfectly sums up not just these complexes, but really Morro's character as a whole. And of course, that is the line, "No one is better than me!" And so that's pretty much all I got for you guys. Overall, when it comes to Morro, like I said, he is my favorite Ninjago villain of all time, and I think he's a genuinely fascinating character when it comes to the show, with many great things about him. And when it comes to Morro's motivation for doing everything that he does, I think that this is just one of the many great aspects about Morro, and it's what makes him a really great character when it comes to the show. And so that's pretty much all I got for you guys. But before I end things, I want to give you guys an update on my Ice Chapter video, because at the time of me making this video, I am nearing the final stages of editing when it comes to this video. I have currently gotten up to the Akita section of my video, and I am currently working on editing it. And when I finish up with that, there aren't that many things left to do when it comes to editing the video, meaning that I am almost done with editing this video. We are nearing the final stages of completion when it comes to this whole thing, and I cannot wait to show you guys the final product. And so that's pretty much all I got for you guys. So tell me down below, what do you guys think? Tell me what are your guys' thoughts when it comes to Morro's superiority and inferiority complex. Again, tell me down below, and I hope you guys enjoy. Later guys, this is Dimension Master Studios, signing off.